To the untrained or ignorant observer, it may be thought that the Orks don't really have anything resembling a culture or a society. After all, they're just a race of savage, hulking brutes who just live to fight and nothing else, right? Well, that's kind of true, but if you dig a little deeper, you can quite clearly see there's much more going on with the greenskins. After all, they're still individualistic with preferences and the like, and nowhere is this perhaps more evident than in their philosophies. Though often geared around warfare, as most everything is for the Orks, these philosophical schools of thought, as it were, are galaxy spanning concepts that will likely survive as long as the Ork race does. We have looked at some of these concepts and groups in the past exploring freebooters and the cult of speed, but these are much, much bigger. They are known simply as the Ork Clans. This is Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. Orkish culture and society is simple enough to understand, once you get past any preconceptions or perceptions that you have toward them. On the smallest scale, you have a warband. This is basically just a gathering of orcs that all fight together under a given boss. This can form a basic society, especially if it's got the correct odd boys, which we've also explored in the past, but it is a very fluid thing, and quite likely it wouldn't get very far. If a particularly powerful warlord can rise from the various war bands, it is possible that the local orcs will all become united under one banner into what is known as a tribe, probably as large a group as you can get in what counts for orcs as peacetime. These tribes are still very fractious, but they can be sustainable to some extent, and if you were to imagine orc settlements and the like, it is probably on a tribal level that you're thinking. However, even the tribes are hardly fixed things, both internally and externally. Orcs are warlike by nature, so inter-tribe wars are exceptionally common and can lead to drastic changes if a new manager takes over. If two tribes clash, likely the loser will be consumed by the other until some sort of critical mass is reached or a fortunate event occurs and a war can properly begin, allowing the size of any orc forces to increase massively beyond what will be considered stable for a tribe in peace. The only thing that can be truly considered as even remotely stable for orcdom are the Great Clans, of which there are 6, which we'll address in this log. Almost every orc is a member of a clan, though there are those who choose to leave and will often become freebooters. However, the clans aren't, what's the word, physical? Tangible? Basically, you would never see a clan of orcs gathered together. If you did, then you'd be dead a few minutes later, I suspect. The clans, despite their name, are more like mindsets or ways of thinking. They denote the various aspects of the orc psyche, and so members of a clan will likely be wildly different from members of another in terms of aesthetic and fighting style. Every warband is different, but ones drawn from a certain clan are likely to have a much higher propensity for certain specialists or styles than another. This also explains why orcs almost never switch clans to our knowledge, and quite likely even freebooter warbands will still maintain traces of clan identities. It seems like they're hard-coded that way. It's not just a simple choice of, oh, which school of thought do I want to follow today? It's much more deep-rooted than that. There's further evidence for this in that certain clans possess unique genetic traits, though quite how this happened or why remains unclear. It may be a residual effect of the work of the Old Ones or whoever the so-called Brain Boys were, giving different groups of orcs different traits that would allow them to survive and or fight more effectively. It is common that warbands or tribes will all be members of the same clan, at least at first, since it's a common thing in all species to congregate with other like-minded individuals. However, as inter-tribe wars happen or wars are formed, it becomes far more likely that these groups will become a mixture of clans. At that point, it takes an incredibly skilled or charismatic, by which I often mean brutal warlord, to hold everyone together, as there will be more fundamental differences than in a mono-clan tribe or warband. But if you've got a war going and the orcs keep winning, that does help. When things start going wrong, things start falling apart, I suspect they'll often fall down along clan lines. Maybe. With the basics of a clan laid out, there are 6 of them to explore, as well as at least mentioning some big names within each of them. The first, perhaps the largest and almost certainly the best known, is the Goth Clan. The Goths embody what most would stereotype the Orks to be: loud, huge, incredibly numerous, and brutal in close combat. The Goths, on average at least, are probably the largest of all of Orkdom, and they love to fight. Seriously, if you thought most Orks were up for a good scrap most of the time, the Goths will literally go looking for any excuse to start a punch-up. That excuse is quickly forgotten though, such as the thrill that fighting brings them. This makes Goth troopers amongst the best at hand-to-hand combat in the Ork race, as they hone their skills so often, and in truth they find it to be their preferred way to fight as well. In an odd sort of way, the Goths have what might be considered honour, though I doubt they'd recognise it as such. I use the term loosely, but a Goth will rarely go for a shot in the back or a cunning distraction, instead preferring to just beat you down in a proper scrap face to face. This no-nonsense, in-your-face approach applies equally to their armour colours, which are usually black with some white checks and accompanied by horns either in symbols or actually mounted on. The Goths' gaudy colours are for wimps, and camouflage is outright cowardice and also completely illogical. As for the horns, they're both symbolic and practical, especially in the latter case with helms. The Goths apparently get on well with bullish beasts that would commonly sport horns, such as those in their clan icon, but on helmets they help make headbutts do that much more damage, which is probably the biggest plus. A Goth army is very much the classical Ork force, a giant horde of angry green monsters stomping forward to beat your face off. It's the giant pile of infantry that would characterise the Goths. It is said their advance and charge can make the ground shake, and when a large Goth tribe is brought to bear, I can totally believe it. Goth mobs do use vehicles, but it's purely to get them to melee faster, and they won't be used once combat begins, so transports are definitely the order of the day over bikes or other flashy gizmos. It would be rare to find a warband that does not include at least some Goths, as they will join any good enough boss en masse if they sense a decent fight might be coming their way. Their natural size, the sheer amount of fighting they do, and the Orkish principle of might makes right means that many Goths will become nobs and bosses. They have something of a superiority complex with the other clans, seeing them all as inferior and to be lorded over, and if any Orc should try to argue, then they can talk to the fist of the Goth in question, most likely. They also come with a bit of a firmer understanding of discipline as a concept, meaning that the ranks of the Storm Boys, youthful Orcs seen as rather odd for wanting a little bit of discipline and regimen in their lives, often do come from the Goths. Unsurprisingly, all these factors combined means that more than a few famous bosses of Orkdom have been drawn from the Goth Clan. The most famous of all, and the most obvious in modern times, is the Prophet of the War, Gazkul Thraka, who is worthy of logs unto himself, and I've covered him in the past. However, there are other infamous names such as Gruk Face Ripper, whose Red War devastated most of a subsector if not beyond, and saw at least one Space Marine chapter annihilated before his death. Unfortunately for the Imperium, Gruk yet lives, which maybe makes sense since he believes he can't lose, and so by the power of Orc belief he can probably cheat death. And though he was usurped by his big mech after his fall, it will be back. While Garagak, a force I've touched on in numerous logs in the past, is also a Goth-led war, with the warboss able to fend off both Raven Guard and Elysian drop troops with ease. Admittedly, the big mech boss Buzzgob has probably made a large part of that possible, but Garagak is still exceptionally dangerous riding around in his personal battle fortress. It is exceptionally likely, though I seem unable to find a clarification, that the feared and renowned boss Zagstruck is also a Goth. This Stormboy boss has supposedly never gone a day without killing something, and his warriors, the famous Vulture Squad named after his fighter bomber, say he even stared down a Squigoth into compliance. Having lost his legs to a Space Marine dreadnought, he now uses bionic legs that work as power claws, perfect for flyby decapitations. Oh, and he's an incredibly strict disciplinarian, happily killing members of his own squad should he need to restore order. Not that it stops Orcs standing up in droves to be part of the Vulture Squad. That's how good his reputation is. Another very famous clan is undoubtedly the Evil Sons, not to be confused with the Cult of Speed, though there are similarities. The Evil Sons are firm believers in the idea of red ones go faster, which, thanks to the power of Ork belief, is exactly what happens. Red armour is therefore basically universal, and I've even heard of bullets and the like being painted red to make them fly that bit faster. As you also might expect given this belief, the Evil Sons love going really, really fast. Warbands are often packed with various vehicles that can even outstrip their counterparts from other clans, and even though every orc is not strictly a biker or that sort of thing, you can expect any infantry to hop in the back of a truck or whatnot. Though they aren't the richest of all clans, we'll get to those, the Evil Sons do have financial goals, namely getting their own bike or group funding a new truck or something like that. Of course, they're still orcs after all, so they are still big fans of crumping things in melee. In an ideal world, high-speed crumping is perfect for them. Many Evil Sons are also members of the renowned Cult of Speed, as again you might expect given their speed-obsessed worldview. The Speed Freaks and the Evil Sons are separate in that you don't have to be one to be the other, but a lot of Evil Sons tribes can be entirely composed of Cult of Speed members, using vast amounts of bikers and the like, even beyond what typical Even Sons can usually muster. This therefore means that the Evil Sons are relatively high-tech by Orc standards, and there are a much larger number of mech boys than in most other clans. As for famous members, Wazdaka Guts Mech might count, though his stance as a bad Orc biker and a freebooter makes me wonder if he's left the clan, despite still being a speed freak. Someone you might not be expecting to be a member of the Sons, and one of the only examples of clan switching I can find, is the somewhat renowned war boss, Gorguts Headhunter. First appearing in the Lorn 5 campaign, Gorguts was originally a member of the Bloodaxe clan that we'll also get to. However, after defeats on both Lorn 5 and then Cronus, he led a war into the Kaurava system that was embroiled in multi-faction warfare, but now as a member of the Evil Sons. Though exactly how many factions he personally cut down in that war seems unclear, by the end of it all, it is believed that Gorguts War and the Feral Orcs of Kaurava II were the ones that stood victorious. With the system then converted into a giant factorum, it is thought Gorguts left soon after before returning to the fray on the planet of Acheron. Though initially caught in another faction war, this time a triple threat with the Blood Ravens and the Eldari, eventually the war boss had to make something of an uneasy alliance with the other races just for the sake of survival. All three groups had seemingly come seeking the Spear of Cain, but the prophecy surrounding it was a trap that unleashed the forces of chaos. Eventually, the world of Acheron was actually destroyed by the Blood Ravens to stop the chaotic infestation, but unbeknownst or perhaps known to the others, Gorguts was able to win the original war and claim the spear for himself. Probably best we never find out what he plans to do with it. The two clans hinted at earlier in this log are known as the Blood Axes, who we named, and the Bad Moons, who we didn't. The Bad Moons are, for want of a better analogy, the merchant caste of Orc society, due to a unique genetic quirk that may indicate design over sheer chance. All Bad Moons have faster growing teeth than other Orcs. This means that they have more teeth available to them, and since teeth are the Orc equivalent to currency, this makes Bad Moons very rich, very fast. This wealth doesn't actually bother Orcs outside the clan over much, since if any Bad Moon gets ideas beyond his station just because he's rich, well, knocking the teeth out of him to put him back in his place wouldn't be too difficult. Of course, this therefore means the Bad Moons need to look to defend themselves, and thanks to their extra wealth, they can certainly do so. Big custom guns, gaudy but effective armour, all sorts of random crazy gubbins, the works. Likely this self-preservation and their smaller size relative to, say, the Goths, means that close combat isn't as much of a thing for the Bad Moons, and it perhaps contributes along with their wealth to the prevalence of their signature unit, the Flash Kits, knobs who will blow their fortune on the most ridiculous armour and dakka that they can afford, blasting enemies away before they get close. If there is a colour scheme for the Bad Moons, it is likely yellow or even gold in the more ostentatious cases. Depends on available resources and funds, I suppose, but they really do go all in on those bright gaudy colours. Combine this with the black flames painted on their armour and the leering icon from which they take their name, and you definitely get a very striking force on the battlefield visually. As for famous bad moons, probably a very renowned name but an unknown individual is the warlord Nazdreg. Supposedly one of the most intelligent known orcs with a fluency in Low Gothic, Nazdreg's obsession with wealth is said to be the only thing stopping his potential to create an incredibly powerful war. However, he still has a shrewd mind for negotiation, striking a deal with the legendary Ghazghkull Thraka to pass on the knowledge of the teleporter technology and field test it on Piscina 4. Though this war was broadly lost and the two warlords did fall out, Nazdreg is believed to live on despite disappearing following the Medusa 5 campaign. The Big Mek Mogrok is also a bad moon, and was the one responsible for and inheritor of the fall of Gruk Face Ripper in the Red War. Though if Gruk has his say, I don't think Mogrok's going to live to celebrate for long. As for the Blood Axes, both other orcs and likely other races would describe this clan as not exactly, well, orky. You see, the Blood Axes were the first Ork Klans said to encounter the Imperium of Man, so the story goes, and unlike other orcs, they seem to have learned a few things from the humans. Camouflage, though not always well applied, was actually one of them, along with the apparently unheard of concept of retreat if a battle was going poorly. This nature makes them inherently untrustworthy for the other Ork clans, but somehow I doubt the Blood Axes mind. In fact, their pinch of the human ways makes them regular mercenaries by said humans. Admittedly, as human teeth and loot are rather worthless, it's often in tech or similar things that the Blood Axe mercs are paid with, which will inevitably come back to bite the original hirers as said tech is later turned on them by the Orks or whoever hires them next. As you might think for a clan that uses camouflage and the like, the sneaky-ish commandos are most commonly members of the Blood Axes, though a fair proportion of the Storm Boys come from the clan too, as maybe the human copying even extended to military discipline. The terror weapon that is Boss Snickrot is probably a Blood Axe too, though unfortunately like Zagstruck I cannot confirm that, and we did mention earlier that Gorgut's Headhunter is drawn from the clan's ranks too. Another well-known Blood Axe boss is the warlord Gratsdaka Mekdaka, who showed those human-imitating tendencies by supposedly donning the uniform of an Imperial commander. His war was enough to capture the industrial world Kaladar IV for a time, but through the efforts of Paragonian tankers and the Black Templars Astartes, he was eventually put down, despite having an immensely powerful Psyker and a looted Shadow Sword super heavy on his side. Finally, the last two clans to address are the Snakebites and the Death Skulls, somewhat polar opposites depending on how you look at it. First, the Snakebites, who are what you might call traditionalists amongst the Orks. I wouldn't go so far as to call them technophobes, but they're certainly not hugely in favour of such things as vehicles, and will rely on traditional practices instead. This means a lot of tribal war paint and a lot of beasts of war. The Snakebites are most renowned for their animals such as squigoths, and even for their Gretchen and Snotlings who are said to be especially ferocious. Even though Snakebite tribes can use trucks, bikes and the like, it is not uncommon that they don't, and instead choose to ride boars or the aforementioned squigoths to war, meaning that Snakebites can remain as feral orcs at times, or it can certainly seem that way. The clan name comes from an initiation or coming-of-age ritual, where the young orc is forced to be bitten by venomous serpents and then suck the venom out as a show of strength. This means that snakes are almost certainly present in every snakebite settlement, or maybe local equivalents if the right sort of thing is lacking, which means that any given snakebite group can really be a real menagerie, especially if they haven't teched up at all. However, that is not to say that snakebites are any less dangerous than the other clans. They're likely pretty resistant to some poisons, and their animals are wild and unpredictable to some extent, which is an asset in itself. Plus, the larger beasts can still pack plenty of Daka, such as the squigoth of boss Bogrot's Bones, which had no small amount of artillery mounted on its back, whilst being ridden by a war boss allied to the Red War. Even if he perhaps wasn't born into the clan and is considered a freebooter, I suspect the Snakebites hold the weird boy old Zogwart in exceptionally high esteem for his close relations with the serpents who flat out refuse to bite him anymore. And then we have the Death Skulls, the most innovative clan by miles and probably the most annoying for both other orcs and the enemies of the greenskins. The Death Skulls are thieves and looters extraordinaire. If something isn't nailed down, a Death Skull can steal it. And if it is nailed down, then likely they just nick whatever it was nailed to as well. No one and no thing is safe. Sometimes it's random junk, sometimes it'll be the boss's favourite gun, and sometimes it'll be infiltrating an Imperial camp to steal a Baneblade, then blast their way out. Yes, that happened. Credit to Nabrot Stubfingers for making off with what is now known as Gork's other foot. It will therefore surprise none of you that the renowned Ork thieves known as looters are commonly associated with the Death Skulls, with whom they feel something of a kindred spirit. But the clan is not just renowned for taking things, but also repurposing them. The mech boys of the Death Skulls are supposedly the best of their kind, even beyond the evil sons who can craft countless speedy and crazy vehicles. Perhaps even they will be on a par with the engineers of the Mechanicus or the Earthcast, maybe even better given they can fix up a wrecked vehicle in mere minutes. However, the mechs have an attention span for whatever they steal that is legendarily short, meaning that whilst they do create some amazing things, they're still not reaching their full potential. The Death Skulls, perhaps unsurprisingly, have a rather bad rep amongst the other clans. Unscrupulous thieves is certainly not an unfair accusation, but I'd be curious whether they would win the poll for least popular clan given the attitudes toward the Blood Axes. There is another side to the Death Skulls though, not just nicking things and making something new out of them. Superstition. The Death Skulls almost universally will wear blue war paint, which is considered a lucky colour by all of Orkdom. They believe, or at least they might believe, that it protects them from harm, and given red ones go faster is a thing, I would not be surprised in the slightest if it actually does. As for the most famous Death Skulls, I believe Mad Dot Grotznik and the so-called Mighty Mangler of Bork are or were Death Skull members, even if I can't find conclusive proof of that in my current research. However, if you want to see the audaciousness of Death Skull thievery, in case Nabrot and his Baneblade wasn't enough, I present to you with War Planet Smasher. The story goes that Big Mech Fragrak wanted to loot an entire planet, becoming the greatest of the Death Skulls ever. We'll ignore the world teleporting chicanery of the War of Beasts. To be fair, I suspect most of the Orks have forgotten that by now, so fine. The target was a world known as Torabrax, a hive world with at least 3 moons. The plan was simple. Shove a huge amount of thrusters onto the 3rd moon, apply some tractor beam technology and then ram it for good measure, and set the moon and the planet on a collision course. There's actually no record of a battle being fought to stop this or make it happen, which is weird to me, but likely this just made Fragrak's job all the easier, and eventually the moon came crashing down on Torabrax. While Planet Smasher assumedly took its name at this point, and would go on to turn the fragmented ruins of the planet into their new and deadly fleet of rocks. So they looted an entire planet and made a fleet out of it. See? Oh, and in case you did think the name came from that mech building some planet-cracking gun, just remember he's a Death Skull. His focus doesn't last long enough to see that sort of undertaking through, no matter how terrifyingly awesome the idea would be to him. So end the tales of the Ork Great Clans. The clans and what they represent of the Orks show clearly the diversity within their race. Whether the brutal Goths, the devious Blood Axes, or the very sneaky Death Skulls, there is no clan you would want to face on the battlefield, but they demonstrate that the greenskins are far beyond the simple savages that many races claim them to be. Now, for the moment, I think it is time that we continue on to the next part of our Champions of Humanity miniseries. I think I wish to explore someone with some psychic potential this time, and I know just who to start with. They may not be the most powerful Astarte Psyker, though that's debatable, but he's pretty incredible nonetheless. Thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.